Hi, my name's Anja Christoffersen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm 23 years old. I'm based in Brisbane. I'm the co-founder and co-director of Champion Health Agency, speaker, author, and disability advocate, amongst an abundance of other roles.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here.
What can you explain first and foremost before we get into it? What does your organisation do?
So, we actually represent people with disability, chronic illness, and carers to professionalize their lived experience.
Ooh.
So, what we're aiming to do is basically get them using their lived experience to have a career in a really flexible way, and not just in health, but in all different sectors.
I love
So,
that.
whether this is as speakers or as researchers or in focus groups, but we basically make personalized management plans for them and send them off into the world.
Right. And what is your disability?
So it's called VACTERL Association.
Okay.
I don't really know how to pronounce it either because no one says it because it's so rare.
Great. Okay,
But
so if we stuff it up, we feel less bad. All right. So
yeah,
say it one more
exactly.
time just for us. VACTERL, is that right?
VACTERL.
Okay.
So it's an acronym that affects 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 40,000, and it stands for vertebral, anal, cardiac, tracheal, and esophageal, so food pipe, air pipe, renal, and limb. So you have to have 3 abnormalities to qualify. I had all except limb. So all my malformations were inside my body, not outside my body. So I can go into each of those, what each of them mean if you'd like.
Absolutely.
1000%,
Okay.
because that, like, my disability goes across different parts of my body as well, but not like that. That's what you just said is it's literally every part of your body pretty much, minus the brain, I think. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. And looking at me, you just cannot tell. So for so long, I didn't even identify as being a part of the disability community. And especially having a rare condition, I think that separated me even more. So in terms of my vertebral abnormalities, I have hemivertebra. So part of my vertebra are actually half formed. I have an extra lumbar vertebra, which helped me with my height. So I was a little bit extra tall. I have congenital scoliosis, so some curvature of my spine,
You mind if I
and I
just
have
interrupt as you're going, just
yeah,
because I don't want to get
go.
to the other parts.
Yeah.
So how does the vertebrae, obviously I've got damaged spinal cord, right?
Yeah.
Following the tumor wrapped around my spine, for people that don't know, you've got damaged vertebrae. Does that affect your spinal cord in the sense that you have loss of function, feeling, incomplete paraplegia, quadriplegia, or where do you land?
So I'm actually really lucky. I haven't had a lot that it's affected my spine. I do have sacral agenesis, so part of the bones in my sacrum are missing, which affects a lot of my pelvic sensations. So I can't feel a lot of my pelvic sensations, but apart from that, my spinal cord is good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, very lucky. And the scoliosis as well.
Yeah, scoliosis, just a bit of pain, but
Yeah,
I've been lucky I haven't had like a spinal brace.
beautiful.
So yeah.
All right, what else? Keep them coming. I'm enjoying this.
Okay, well, this is the
The shopping
exciting
list
one
of
is
disability.
This is awesome.
so the exciting one is A for anal. And I was born with a cloaca. So this is the most complex anorectal malformation. And a cloaca is what birds have actually. So it's just one opening instead of, as a woman, you usually have 3. I'd assume that you boys would know that. So I had my intestine and 2 vaginas and a urethra all going into one opening coming out of my body. Um, 2 uteruses, 2
Hang
cervixes.
on. You got Angus's face. I've just got to, I know this is an audio medium, but Angus's mind just got blown. Why is it mind blown?
I'm still stuck on 3. Is mouth 1?
What? We're talking about pelvic openings. Come on.
There's the
You know that.
Vaginal.
wait, stop.
Vaginal and anal.
No, but
Belly button.
where you do a wee when you're a female is different to where you have the sex, like the babies come out.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
No, I knew that.
Well, that's the 3.
Well, I didn't know, but that's like a same area. Okay, cool. Well,
I'm
I'm
so
glad.
glad I could teach you something.
Thank you very much. I have a child.
Did you think they did a wee out of the same spot?
No, I didn't think that, but
You
it's
did.
the same.
Hang on.
No, hang on. No.
You just said it publicly that is what you thought there was 2. That everyone is nodding.
Well, everyone else is female.
Yeah, I'm not. I knew that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for hopefully
How old are
informing.
you?
I'm playing the dumb guy so that everyone else at home can not feel so bad for not knowing that there was 3. So my apologies for that. And then you really rush past some incredible stuff. So you have one opening where someone else normally would have 3, but like multiple cervixes and.
Yeah, so one opening that went into 4 basically. So the 2 vaginas, urethra, and intestines. And then you had the 2 uteruses and the 2 cervixes sitting at the bottom of the uteruses, and then 1 ovary off each uterus. So because I only had the 1 opening coming out when I was born, it wasn't functional. I couldn't get things out of my body, obviously, because it would all contaminate. So I had to have a colostomy, which is the bowel for the or the bag for the bowel, and a vesicostomy, which is the bag for the bladder, just to be able to get waste out of my body when I was born. So that surgery happened at 5 hours old.
Oh
And
my
then at 7
goodness.
months, I was cut literally from front to back to the base of my spine. And I had all 3 openings reconstructed.
I was going
But
to ask that. Yeah,
unfortunately,
how does that go? How, especially, 20 years ago, I imagine,
yeah.
probably a lot harder than today. What's the plan? Is there such thing as artificial, like ways to try and help?
Um, I don't think so. They really haven't made much progress, is my understanding. They still do the same surgery that they did on me when I was a child. But what that meant is I had to go through a process of dilatation for both my anal opening and my vagina to get them a functional size. But in terms of an anal sphincter and bowel control, because that was impacted by my spine as well, I didn't have a natural anal sphincter. I didn't have those muscles. I didn't have nerves. I didn't have anything to be able to actually control my bowel. So from that reconstruction until now, I had bowel incontinence, and there was absolutely nothing that anyone could do to stop that.
That's just so, I mean, incredible that the ability to be able to help you from birth to, where we are now is incredible. But just that being a possibility that no idea. Before this, I had no idea what VACTERL was, didn't know it existed before we, got to your email. But this is just mind blowing that this could happen and that reconstructive surgery exists.
You also thought that women pee out of the same area. You have
I
sexy
did
times.
no. I did
You
no.
did. That is what
I was
you
playing it for people at home who
No,
didn't
that's what
understand
you
it.
thought.
No, that's what you didn't
Well-
understand was I understood.
We're going to come back to this area because I want to know more, but let's finish the acronym.
C.
Yep. C. C's cardiac, a hole in my heart at birth.
Oh.
Very, very lucky. It healed itself before I
Okay.
needed surgery.
You were having a
So-
rough time early on, guys. It's just
yeah. So
fucking luck.
that thankfully was just parked. I have some heart issues now. Take a beta blocker, it's fine.
Okay.
So TE is
So
tracheal
C's scrapped. We're good
esophageal.
with C. C's now.
Good with C.
Okay, cool.
Good.
Cool.
TE, so the E is for esophageal because it's American spelling. So my food pipe was joined into my air pipe going into my lungs and not joined into my stomach at all. So that also had to be reconstructed when I was 5 hours old. But what that actually meant was that my air pipe was collapsed into a figure 8, which is called tracheobronchomalacia. So my bronchial and trachea, figure 8, so it's difficult to breathe. But also my swallowing, they accidentally severed through both of my vagus nerves in that surgery at 5 hours old.
Oh.
So that controls a lot of your esophageal contractions and other things like that. So my esophagus is only functional by gravity. So they say that on your esophageal pressure test, that if you're under 100 of esophageal pressure, that you have a not functioning esophagus. Mine was 8, so it's the worst that any of my specialists has ever seen. So not too
Wow,
good.
So what do we do about that? Yeah. Like,
Nothing.
So hang on.
So
I'm hungover in bed.
mhm.
I reach over to get a water because I'm parched. I just have a sip side because I can barely move and operate. I have a sip on my side, spill some on the sheets, but still I get some water in. That's not possible for you. You'd have to be sitting upwards.
Yeah, it would basically just kind of flow back back and forth. And horizontally, I'd have to tilt myself back up. So I actually have some bricks under the top of my bed, so my bed's on a little bit of a tilt. It's
I used to have the opposite of that, just side fact,
Oh,
because
really?
I get poor circulation, obviously, because I'm always sitting upright. So my legs were higher, so the blood flow would go to my head, so I get better circulation to my legs.
That's
There you go.
interesting.
Oh, I haven't
That's
never said that on this
amazing.
podcast.
Oh,
Fast
there you
forward.
go. Fun facts.
Yeah. Okay,
Wow.
so that is still like that today. You can't really do much to fix that, correct?
Yeah, so nothing to do. Unfortunately, my swallowing has somehow gotten worse, which I didn't think that would be possible. So sometimes when I eat, I cough and my voice changes and it's a bit dramatic. But the only thing that they can do is an esophagectomy where they take your entire esophagus out, which is what they do for esophageal cancer patients. and then reconstruct it out of stomach tissue, but that's not going to leave me in a better place. So it's kind of one of those things that you just live with now.
Can I ask one more question about that? So I've got a ready-made meal company called Able Foods, and the one thing we're really passionate about is our texture modified food for people that do have problems with swallowing and stuff like that. Is that in your wheelhouse? Do you do that, or can you eat, I say normal food, you know what I mean? Can you cut, if you went out and had a steak or a parma or whatever, can you cut it and eat it, or do you have to do something about it?
Yes, I basically eat everything. I just wash it down with a lot of liquid.
Okay.
But the strange thing for me is that all of those like purees and things that they usually give to people with swallowing issues just glug up my esophagus, so it makes it worse.
Yeah.
So I need like crunchy things, but with sauce.
Cool.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's kind of what we had the same response from our community about using, if you make a steak and put in a Nutribullet, it doesn't actually work. So with the texture modifier, they reform it so it's actually a bit easier to eat when it breaks down. But like, again, just blew my mind. I never thought about options like that, which is really cool. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What are we up to?
Really cool.
C&E. VACTERL. I can't spell R.
I've done TER is renal. So pretty easy, only one single kidney. So most people have two, Angus, just in case you didn't know that.
Thank you very much.
You're
Always
welcome.
good
You're
to
welcome.
Double check the biology and anatomy with me, please, going forward.
All right. So only one single kidney, no major issues, healthy kidney, but just some recurrent like UTIs and infections and things like
shout
that.
out to
Just the usual.
I had renal failure as a kid. I'm one kidney.
Yeah.
I'm one kidney, and the other one's probably like a 0.2 of a kidney. Does that make sense? It's there, but my spine was so crooked with scoliosis, it's bulging into it, so it doesn't work very well. So hey, we're on the same page. Good job.
There you go.
Can I ask you, or we can play if you don't want to anything on this podcast? If you don't want to answer, go for it. But can you go to the bathroom normally? Can you, like when you do away and stuff? Is that as normal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So thankfully that's normal. The only thing that happened was somehow when I grew from when they created my 3 openings, it grew into just 2 openings. So when I was 15, 16, I had just all these examinations and tests, and they realized my urethra had grown to be inside my vaginal opening. So that's just been an issue with infections, but I still, I guess, go to the bathroom in my normal. But now I'm the woman that Angus expects all women to have.
I
didn't know if I could say
it,
it, but I must say Angus was right.
I knew it.
Angus.
He was right.
I'd actually done my research on you, Anja, and I knew that, and I was probably getting a little bit too forward earlier in the interview to allow you to discuss this.
And you can come back anytime, right? This is
I had to drop that bombshell.
This is good stuff.
So that's VACTERL.
No, wait.
VACTERL.
No, L.
Yeah.
L.
Lim, no problem.
Okay, just want to hear.
And so you've got a.
Sorry, one more thing. Have you ever thought of just chopping a few fingers off just to get the L as well?
Oh, well, maybe one day. I don't have any.
The Holy Trinity.
Yeah.
Get them all.
It's not Thanos in Avengers. I finally got all the crystals.
Oh,
God. So you came into the studio today and you have a nose piece. Is that to assist with oxygen or is that to assist with sustagen? What's happening with this?
This is the sustagen. Yeah. So unfortunately, over the past 18 months, I've lost quite a ridiculous amount of weight. And it was after a surgery that I probably should never have had. And it was actually for reflux. So they it's called a funduplication surgery. Might have heard of it. Wrapped the stomach around the bottom of the esophagus. Unfortunately, wrapped it a little bit too tight for me. So I couldn't get any food or water into my stomach for the 11 days that I spent in hospital. Lost a lot of weight in that time. I think I dropped 6 kilos in those 10 days. And then it just put my body into a really strange metabolism pattern. So even though I can consume double the amount of calories I was consuming before, my body's just losing weight. So trying to just put whatever we can in, eating large KFC meals, whatever. Otherwise I'll become a magician with a disappearing trick.
Yeah, that's not funny, but I'm so keen on that. I'm not forgetting.
Right?
Exactly right. I can't. If I eat KFC, I jiggle for 4 weeks. Shout out to KFC if I'm sponsoring the podcast. Can I say,
endorsement
with the reflux? Is that like heartburn reflux kind of vibe? You're getting pain, is that right?
Yeah. So it was actually coming up, and I was like vomiting blood.
I was about to compare. Because of my scoliosis, I only found this out. I have to eat something called Somac every day because I get such bad reflux. And I had not the same as you, but I had to test to see what was going on. And because of the scoliosis, my esophagus can't close. I just found that out. But same thing, they offer those kind of surgeries, and guess what? I'm not doing it now. That sounds, I'm out. I'll just eat this pill.
No.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Maybe you need to like get a bed on a V, because with your feet tilted up, it's probably
True, it's not helping.
not doing well. Yeah.
So we can't see behind you. We can obviously, because we're in different studio places. You've got the tube going into your nose. Do you have like a little, what's it attached to, like a pack or something?
Oh, just that.
Oh, that is. Can you explain
Yeah,
it
it's
to us?
just
Oh, you haven't
okay,
attached
so
it to your food sachet.
no.
Yeah.
So it's just like a little kind of almost like a cannula
Yeah.
syringe.
Yeah.
I don't know the technical word.
Yeah.
So you basically just get a syringe and you fill it with the feed and then squeeze it through the syringe into the tube.
Has
Yeah,
the feed got taste?
unfortunately, but obviously because it goes directly into my stomach, I can't taste it.
Okay.
But you can smell it, and it just
Yeah.
smells like sickly sweet caramel milkshake, which
Ooh.
should be
Because it would be
appealing.
high calorie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's got protein and fats and everything in it, or just
Yeah, protein, fats, sugar. It's supposed to have all nutrients, but honestly, it just smells like sugary
Yeah.
syrup. Yeah.
You have spoken about in your book as well, which you mentioned, Behind the Smile. We'll get into that soon. But you've spoken about you had, in your words, traumatic hospital experiences. Do you want to speak about some of those? Maybe the reflux might be one of them. But is there any other stories that stick out for you?
Yeah, I've had a lot of traumatic hospital experiences, and it's hard to not throw anyone under the bus, but I think it's really
be careful.
important. Yeah, don't want to get us all sued.
I'm the same. I've had some
but-
shockers. You got to keep them.
But I think it's so important to talk about, because I think so many other people, at least in my community, that have had, rarer conditions, have these traumatic experiences, especially, and get, PTSD from being in medical settings so frequently. So one of the experiences I had, which is probably one of the most traumatic, was when I was 15 and I was going through this process called vaginal dilatation, which I briefly mentioned earlier. And so this was to prepare me to become sexually active, because I wasn't actually able to be sexually active before that. And it was a process where you had to basically forcing to become bigger with these dilators. And I went in to see a gynecologist, and it wasn't my usual gynecologist. And they basically were trying to push my capacity. And I was basically telling them, no, this is too much, until it got to a stage where I was being forced, and I literally had to scream and get this lady to pull it out of me. After that, I was bleeding for a few days, and I then had to be admitted into hospital, and I was too scared basically to go back to that hospital. So I went to another hospital and was in there for quite a few days. And then obviously that set all of this progress back. And I think that a lot of the time you don't realize that these kinds of traumatic experiences have a lot of impact on everything outside of your hospital life. So I think it's really important to actually just discuss them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my partner, Chantel, who's a sexologist, she helps women through the dilation process as well. That's what she does. That story is harrowing. And then, if you're speaking out of turn, tell your aim, but of course, then you go out in the world and that affects your sexual activity. It's the same kind of stress. That would be tough.
Absolutely. And I was, 15, 16 at the time. I had not been sexually active. That was like one of my first sexual experiences with a doctor. And so of course after that, I had no interest in continuing dilatations, and that set me back significantly. So I think, it does have a massive impact. Yeah.
That's where what you do at your organization. I've got a consulting company called GSA, where we educate people about disability, and every single one of our consultants has a disability, all 50 of them. That's where lived experience comes in, because the medical industry, hospitals, nurses, everyone does such a great job. If you don't know anybody with a disability, you've read the manual, that person's read the manual and goes, this is what I got to do. It's like, no. You've got to listen to someone who's had experience in that and how that can affect them in their everyday life. And I remember I had an operation when I was about 11, and I was like, I don't want to get this absolute weapon anywhere near me. Like, I bedside man, it was so bad. I could not hate him anymore. Guess what happened? Stuffed up, right? And I just knew that I felt like I was just, there's 8 people today for the operation with bang, 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 bang. I was like, excuse me, like, that's not how, maybe for, someone who is able-bodied, it's their own one and only time in hospital, but when you've been there your whole life, it affects you, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's all about bringing that humanity into healthcare. When you change the narrative, and it's not just statistics, but you incorporate that lived experience element and it's humanity. I
Mm.
think that's when everything just changes and it has the power to really change systems.
So obviously you had medical professionals in that area. And obviously, you had your traumatic experience. Do you go see other professionals to try and get, that confidence back with your body? How do you overcome that, or are you still trying to overcome that sort of hurdle of those early steps when you're 15?
I think at that time I really just pushed on with it, to be honest. I didn't see anybody until mid last year, really. I just, I really, because I spent a lot of time alone, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Dylan, but I was in a hospital bed a lot of the time by myself for
Mm.
most of my life. So you think a lot and you work things out, and I was used to that introspection, and because I was so used to that, I could deal with it and I could push through.
Yeah, I agree. You got to
Yeah,
be careful with that, but I think I know better than most
you have
doctors
to be
because I
careful.
actually do know my body. But then it's something I've actually, as you get up, any young person with a disability, trust me, you know your body well. But then when something different happens, get it checked. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'm always like, no, I was a bit of a legend in my early 20s and it got me into trouble a couple of times. But in saying that, I've had experiences where I'm like, I don't think that's right with the doctor, and I've been right, but it's important because, as I said, you can't put us in the boxes because every single person with a disability is some way different. You know what I mean? And it is a bit of
Yeah.
trial and error. You don't want to go too far, but like, I don't know, please go see medical professionals. I'm not saying don't do it, but you learn your body so well, don't you? You really do. And
Yeah.
you make really good decisions about it. And I'm probably the fittest and healthiest and happiest I've been just because I've had experience.
Exactly.
So 35 surgeries, 150 hospital admissions, a lot of nights by yourself, a lot of times yourself. But for the first 19 years of your life, you've talked about feeling that you needed to be silent to be accepted. What was that turning point, and how did you come to that moment?
So the turning point for me was, for some reason, I thought that this was something that I could just grow out of. I think came down to that medical model of disability that I could be fixed. And I thought that, I spent my first 5 years of life really, really in hospital all the time almost. And then I almost got well. And I thought that this was going to be, I beat it. And then I was going to have, a normal life, to use that horrible word. Um, and suddenly I was 15 and I got really unwell while I was in school, and no one could work out what was wrong. And I didn't know when or if I was ever going to get better. So I had to drop out of high school. But then I somehow thought that that was just a period of time in my life that I would somehow get through. But then it got to 2017. And in 2017, I had 3 abdominal surgeries in 8 months. And in these surgeries, I thought that, I was just a typical young teenage girl needing to have, a surgery to remove a tubo-ovarian abscess, right? And they went in to operate on me and they cut me open and they couldn't operate because everything was matted together with scar tissue. And it was so, so severe. And they basically closed me up and they said, you might, if we go in to reoperate, you might need a kidney transplant because if we, nick the ureter from your kidney that's wrapped up in the scar tissue, that's a
Oh,
huge risk.
don't be doing
You
that.
might,
Yeah.
right? You might need an ostomy because the risk to bowel damage is high. Like the main blood supply to your leg is also wrapped up in there. Like there's such high risk that maybe we just leave this huge growth inside you. So I basically had this huge kind of decision to make, and I was really young. And I ended up having to go ahead with this emergency surgery a few weeks or a few months after, because I was just in and out of hospital just so often, and the lump had now grown to 10 by 13 centimeters inside me. You could see it coming out of my body. Went through that surgery, really, really tough recovery. And within a few months, I had a cyst in my other ovary and they had to go back in again. Thankfully, everything went really well in all of these surgeries. But what it made me realize was, surely I can't be the only one with VACTERL living in this world. There must be others, and how are they going? So I started to reach out to the community, in just like those online Facebook support groups, and I started to share my story. And as soon as I shared my story, I saw the value in that story, and the recognition and how it could actually change people's lives. And when I saw that power, um, that my story could have in actually making a difference, there was no question about it. I just had to go for it.
Geez, you're well spoken. You tell it so
Oh, thank
well.
you.
I'm serious. Like, so young, like impressive, and to be, disability proud, as I like to call it, which you are. It's at a young age and express why is impressive. Are you, your family, and medical professionals like just in all that you're still kicking and alive? Like with the amount of things that have happened, is it? It's just it sounds
Have you
incredible.
beat the odds? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really seems like it. It's every so often I go through this, new disaster that pops up, and everyone gets concerned and is worried that, that maybe this time it's the decline, and I'm kind of in the middle of one of those at the moment. But every time I seem to pull through and be okay, and I think it's because there's something that I've got left to do.
yeah,
A lot
good.
of things actually. Yeah.
You kicked off your own intro and you spoke about all the things that you're doing, and I'm sure there's more things in the future you'll continue to do. But one of the things that you've spoken about, and you can see people to Google your name, we'll have it on our socials as well, is that you did take part in I guess, what could be a traditional beauty pageant. Um, as somebody who has dealt with the aesthetic of their own body for a long time, what was the purpose and for you to go into that, and what was the hope that you were going to get from it?
So I'd been modeling since I was about 15 or 16, and going into beauty pageantry was actually quite a transition. I thought that it was going to be really the same, but it's quite a different world. You have to, walk differently, dress differently, and you're a lot more bubbly and smiley. Which in modeling I was used to, never smiling, which I preferred, to be honest. So suddenly I was in a new world. I had my incredible co-founder of Champion, Mary, who was helping to train me for the pageant, and who's been my manager in modeling for 7 years before I dragged her into the health space. And I just thought that it was time for me to move a little bit more away from the modeling space to the pageantry space, at least for a little adventure, because I didn't want to just be seen anymore, but I wanted to be heard. I wanted to actually stand for something. And even though pageants don't really seem like they stand for much to people that could be exterior to the world, there's that charity fundraising component, there's a speaking component, there's an interview component. So I knew that I could actually showcase that, I'm a young person with a disability that is a rare disability. I have incontinence. I'm going to stand up on that stage. I'm going to be proud. I'm going to have my scars out. I'm going to be wearing a tiny little white bikini while I've got bowel incontinence. And I'm just going to go for it. And I was on stage with the most incredible women that were all so well spoken. And I ended up coming second in Australia, which was just a little bit of a fluke, I'd like to say, but I did work
Hey,
very, very hard for it. So,
nothing's
Who
given.
yeah.
who won? Get rid of them. Put them in the bin. Should have
Oh,
been
she
me.
was great. She
Okay,
was
good.
great. She's a nurse, so we got to keep
Fair
her.
enough. Fair
Okay,
enough.
no,
Love
Yeah.
nurses.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
we'll that one back, mate.
Can I literally will? Can I ask you about when you started modelling? So you got your tube coming out your nose at the moment. As we said, you got scars. Talk me through the modelling industry, because as someone in a wheelchair, we were just told to ship off. When you started, probably only recently has diversity and inclusion for people with disabilities started being integrated, and I'm talking recently, like this year recently,
And still seems a little
and still seems a bit tokenistic. So, what was your experience like through that?
Well, absolutely the same as how you've just described, really. Like it's quite tokenistic and quite like you're excluded, really,
Mm.
in the most part. And if I didn't have, the agent that I had taking a chance on me, then I wouldn't have really had the shot that I had. So when I first started, I went to a modeling agency and I had an interview, and they asked if I had any scars. I said yes. Of course, they asked to see them. I showed them my stomach. And they were like, no, well, if you want to model, you can't show your stomach ever. No one's going to want to book you. And even though that was, still a while ago now, it was at a time where diversity inclusion was starting to come into the space a little bit more, where at least they were like, if you have a scar or something, we can Photoshop it out. So it was kind of at least at that stage where they're like, well, if you've got something, then, we'll fix it for you. So it seemed like you could be anyone and still be in that space, even if you weren't able to show your representation. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I could still be accepted here. But the truth from that agency's perspective, at least, was that I couldn't be accepted if I had scars on my stomach. So that was a little bit of a kick in the guts. And I kind of ventured into the more broad fashion space for a while before I found the agency that I ended up being represented by. I got signed on a 3-month development contract. I worked so, so, so hard. And within 1 month, I was extended to a 12-month contract because I booked quite a bit of work. And then within a year of that, I was over in Amsterdam, and I walked Amsterdam Fashion Week the day before my 18th birthday, which was
Cool.
just my hugest goal. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't, I basically had to keep my kind of disability hidden.
Mm.
Really, it wasn't necessarily as a representation. It was more like it was a representation to me, and it was going to be a representation when I could tell my story afterwards. But at the time, it was more just trying to blend in with everybody else so I could be accepted in that world. Which, as soon as they realized that you had scars, you could not be accepted because either you did not look, I guess, disabled enough in terms of their perception if they're wanting to hire you as a kind of diversity inclusion model, or you don't look model enough.
Mm.
So, bit
Tough
of a
space.
brutal
Yeah.
industry.
It's hard.
You'd
Yeah.
they'd rather you be an amputee. Oh, just got one leg.
Mm.
You know, so I know what you mean.
Yeah. Should have had the limb part of VACTERL, hey?
Yeah, see, you need the
Yeah.
back truck, you know, the back truck.
Got ripped off.
I have 3 bowl of uncomfortable questions for you.
Good.
So the bowl of uncomfortable is where people send through from our socials a question they wouldn't feel comfortable asking you face to face, or at least maybe they would if they got to get to know you, but they charge us with the responsibility of doing that.
And as always, if you're not up for them, you just let us know.
Yeah.
I think you're pretty open, which we're enjoying.
This person's attempted to make humor without knowing you, so I'll let you, if you find this funny, good for you. What preparation goes into making sure the term "I'm shitting myself" doesn't come into play literally for you on a runway?
Look, it's
Where's the wording for that person?
I love them.
Yeah, I know, but
They're awesome.
people are realizing that more and more that we're so comfortable being ourselves, so they've just got looser and looser, which is good.
Well, I think that's kind of broken the ice for me to say shitting now, so I'm
Yeah.
really glad about that.
Yeah.
So right now I'm in a little bit of a difficult situation with my health, but before then I used to do this thing called a bowel washout, I guess, or that's what I called it at least. And that was a rectal irrigation. So basically, like a rectal enema with a 1 liter water flush. So I used to do that before runways to make sure that I was clear and I wouldn't really have very many accidents. But I still had some embarrassing moments. I had one accident on the runway, and it was just after my debut for Maya, which is probably the worst possible time for anything to happen. So I think, yeah, trial and error, praying to whatever God you believe in,
Yeah.
probably.
Do you still
Best answer.
roll with that setup just for everyday life as well, or is it a bit less complicated because there's less risk it happens?
Yeah, well, so I roll with that setup really for everyday life until a few months ago when I started having more complications with my health because all of my scar tissue's now wrapped everything up and is obstructing my bowel. So yeah, but otherwise I would recommend that system to people that, deal with incontinence because it works so well for
Able bodied
me.
people do that as well, to be honest.
Second question, it's in the same vein.
Oh.
Do you wear adult diapers? And if so, how do you own that?
Oh, look, I hadn't really been a big adult diaper wearer. I usually just wore pads, but the more that you have issues with, I guess, like bowel clean outs and things like that, I had to venture a little bit into the adult diaper space occasionally. And yeah, look, it's a tough one. I think it can be really difficult to like wear things under clothes because a lot of the clothes that I wear are tight. Um, so yeah, I think you just have to own it. Like, I think it gives you a security and peace of mind that you just wouldn't have without them. So you just have to go for it if that's what you need. But if it's not what you need, then I guess you're just a really, really privileged person.
And the third
Yeah.
question kind of wraps up our chat with you, but also encompasses a lot of what we've spoken about. How do you have a conversation with somebody that you might be interested in on basically what VACTERL is? Vaginal, renal, anal, all of that. Is it first date just to weed out people who wouldn't be interested? Do you save it to the third date and hope that they're still interested? How does it happen?
Well, look, so when I first started dating and I wasn't able to have, or wasn't even able to be sexually active, I'd have to just, go on the first date, sit down and be like, hey, guess what? I can't have sex with you. And then they never call me back. So weird, right? So it would come out really at the beginning. And now I think that it's pretty clear in my public profile that I'm just an incontinent young woman with VACTERL. So
someone should have Googled you. That's right. Yeah. It's up to them. You shouldn't be rocking up to a Mexican restaurant going, hang on, sorry, what?
Just send them this,
send them research.
Hey, send them this podcast.
I will.
Well, you made that
It's good.
very uncomfortable, in fact, comfortable. So thank you very much for answering those 3 questions.
Can I ask you, you've impressed me today. I'm impressed by you. What's the plan?
Thank you.
Where do you want to see yourself? What do you want to do? I think you're going to be a big voice and a big player in this, which I like because there needs more and more. Where do you want to get to?
Well, my big dream is building, Champion Health Agency into an empire, because, I have spent a lot of time, well, actually, I haven't spent a lot of time in the spotlight. I was going to say that, but that's not true. But I want to be able to support other people to do the things that I've loved doing and amplifying my own lived experience through speaking and writing and, research and co-design and all of that. I want to be able to work with other people with disability, chronic illness, lived experience, and be able to cater that to them and bring them into community, be their cheerleaders, help them in whatever capacity that they are able to, do. That's where I want to be. And I see it, expanding internationally. I see it being the powerhouse. I see, instead of all disability consultants popping up everywhere, that they can be under this one roof, and that instead of people making decisions that are just sitting in power without this lived experience, that people with lived experience can actually be brought in to make the decisions that affect them.
Woo!
Angus, if
Yep.
you want,
Just FYI, she was not reading that.
no, and also
There.
I love it.
Should
'cause
have been.
if you want to speak about somebody at a table, well, they need a seat. At the
Invite
table.
them to it.
No, it's true.
Exactly.
VACTERL.com.au, which is VACTERL.com.au, and at Anja Christoffersen on Instagram. Of course, you can
Do we stuff that up? Say it yourself.
Christoffersen.
At Anja Christoffersen.
We'll have all the links on our Instagram as well as this episode goes out. Thank you so much for your time. That was so enlightening. I had no idea. No idea. And now I'll always go through life knowing a little bit more.
You're part of the family now, so look forward to hanging out with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.